It's that time of the month where I'm going to rank every single eyeshadow palette I tried in the month of December from worst to best. In the month of December, I tried 8 eyeshadow palettes, which is honestly higher than I thought it was going to be because there was very minimal launches in December up until the very, very end. But you can kind of tell because a lot of the palettes that I ended up trying weren't necessarily brand spanking new, but you'll see. I'm toasty. Oh my gosh. Guys, look at the Starbucks cup. Isn't this the prettiest cup ever?
You're welcome.
Jose bought it for me for Christmas. It makes water taste better, okay? It just makes it more fun. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. Palette number 8. Not a single bad palette this month. So while this palette is ranking number 8, it's a good palette. It's just my least favorite of the 8, but it's still a good palette. It's this little guy from CoverGirl. I did a drugstore haul a few weeks ago, and I finally tried out the CoverGirl eye enhancers in the absolutely iconic shade Shimmering Sands. I remember hearing about this when I first got into makeup, 10 years ago? More than 10 years ago, honestly, 11, 12 years ago. But this is a very simple trio. It's got the cheapest packaging on earth. But if you are looking for what I would call a Tom Ford eye on a budget, this is going to give it to you. So the characteristics of a Tom Ford shadow are basically not too pigmented, but really smooth looking on the eyelid, kind of blends itself, gives you a really simple, minimal look with very minimal effort. And I feel like this trio gives it to me. And listen, it's ranked 8, but I still really like it. It's just not anything that's new and exciting for me, but I really think that this is the drugstore version of Tom Ford, and there is literally like an $80 difference between the two. It's not as good as Tom Ford, but it's really, really good, and it's definitely better than an $80 price difference. It's more so of a classic. Nostalgia got me with this one. I really like it, but it is nothing special in my collection. But for a quick, easy, dirty eye, great for work, great for every day, I actually do recommend this. Okay, number 7, while it's not the last favorite, I do have my opinions. So we're gonna talk about number 7, which is the Pat McGrath Labs Golden One from the Star Wars collection. I have decided, after reading many of your comments and seeing other people's reviews, this collection was a flop. That doesn't mean the quality was bad, but just in general, I feel like it was put together quite lazily, which Pat McGrath is not really known to do. You know, I do have high expectations for the brand. So first of all, I don't love the packaging on this. It's a sticker. It's a piece of cardboard with paper wrapped around it, right? I don't know, it just looks cheap. It doesn't look luxury. However, I do really like the shadows that are inside, but again, nothing special in my routine, nothing that really excited me, but the quality is really nice. This new formula from Pat McGrath, I'm a big fan of. Yeah, but I look at it, nothing about it excites me from Pat McGrath. It's very, very safe. It's very nice quality, so if you really do love more warm-toned neutrals, I actually do recommend this palette. It is nice quality, very pretty, very smooth, and a very luxurious / elegant formulation from Pat McGrath. It definitely is a bit different than the formulas she launched before, and I think she did a great job with them. I did do a review on this if you kind of want to see it in action, but I actually really like this one, but the collection itself was a bit of a disappointment to me. Number 6 is a surprising one. I actually ended up liking this a lot more than I thought I would. This is from ColourPop, and it's a Small World collection. I've used this in, what was it, like all of the new ColourPop collections that have come out compilation video. And so I thought I'd try this. Originally, I wasn't even going to keep this. I was gonna give this away because the colors didn't really excite me, but something in me was like, just wear it today. So I ended up creating a gorgeous look with that palette, and well, this palette. And then I actually, since I felt like this was the palette that I've used the least in the last month, I decided to use it again today, and I like this palette. This is not one that really caught my eye, but I think it's a good palette. Now, it's not A+ quality from ColourPop. I would say these shades could use a little bit more pigment. There's a pressed glitter here, which just really isn't that great. It's not a perfect palette, but ColourPop's price point, I still think they do a great job for the price point, and I actually have had a lot of fun with this color story. It actually makes a lot more sense as I started to use it. It's very easy to use, and you can get some very pretty looks. So I've been enjoying this. Not the best ColourPop palette that I have used, but I've actually gotten some gorgeous looks with this. So I did use it for today's look. I'm going to share really quickly how I got it. I started off with the shade Laugh right here as my transition color, just kind of bleed through the whole look once it was done. It's like 1 to 2 shades darker and peachier than my skin tone. Just adds that first base layer of powder. And then to make it more pink and get a little bit more vibrancy in the eye, I went in with Imagination, and I again applied that to the crease, keeping it a little bit lower than that first color that we used. But you can see this created more saturation in the eye, give it a little bit of a pop. And then of course, wanted some definition, I went into the shade After All right here. This is my outer corner color. I did have to build it up a lot. It doesn't have the most amount of pigment, but to make up for that, it is quite blendable. So I would prefer blendability over the pigment, but I would like a little bit more depth with this shade. It's fine. I would change it, but it's still fine. And then I went in with the shade 1966 right here, and I applied this to the center of my lid. I'm never attracted to these kinds of shades, right? But in some looks, they just are so useful, and this is one of those looks, and it surprisingly is really nice quality. When it comes to ColourPop shimmers, I find that they will have a lot of fallout, just look a little crumbly on the eyelid. This one adheres to the eyelid great, and I think it's a great addition in this palette. It's just in the center of my eyelid and my lower lash line, and it looks so nice. The sun, and then on the inner corner of my eye, with whatever space was left over, I went into the shade Joy. Now this one is a little bit more crumbly. It adheres to the lid, but you do have to be a little bit careful. So that is that light purple pop. I think it's very neat how my look went from purple to red and then to purple again, but I just have that pop of purple in the inner corner. So it's an okay shade. It probably would benefit from being wet, but it still worked fine. And then I did attempt to use Smile, which is this golden pressed glitter. Does not apply well with a brush. It probably would work fine if you use a finger and just patted it all over the lid, but that's not the effect that I wanted today. So with a brush, it was useless for my inner corner highlights. So then I went ahead into Dream, which is a super shock formulation. So it's really putty-like and squishy. And I use this to highlight the inner corner and underneath my brow bone to give a little bit of gleam. And as you can see, I love today's look. So even though my eye wasn't initially drawn to this palette and I was kind of on the edge of whether or not I wanted to keep it, I've liked this a lot more than I thought I would. I think the color story ended up being more cohesive and beautiful than I initially anticipated. Number 5 is another Pat McGrath palette from the Star Wars collection, and this is the Sith Seduction. So this one has these really grungy kind of deep tones, and I have mixed feelings about placing this one over the golden one because my eye is more drawn to this color story. I like it better, but in terms of creating a whole look, you're going to create a whole look with the golden one and not with this one. So when I try to create a full look with all of these colors on my eye, not reaching into other palettes, I find that the look is a little bit patchy. So this needs to be paired with some matte shades, but the reason that I'm ranking it higher is because individually, these shades are stunning, and I think they're relatively unique for Pat McGrath because this is a different formulation. These are really wet and reflective on the eyelid. Still not as good quality as the ones that launched in the holiday collection of this formulation. So again, it's not perfect, but I really like these colors. I really love the look of this palette. It's a great lid topper kind of palette, but creating a full look with this would drop it down to probably number 8, but that's not how I use it. I don't know. It's not a must-have, but again, it's nice. It has some pretty colors. You know how I feel about the collection. Number 4 is from Natasha Denona, and this is the mini pastel palette. How interesting, right? Whenever Natasha or Pat McGrath come out with a palette, they always rank like 1 and 2 if they come out in the same month. Not this month. You'll be surprised by the top. But this mini pastel palette, I have nothing bad to say about it. I think it's really nice. I did a beautiful look in my original review. I've played with it a few times since, and again, it's very pretty, but it's just not something that I'm inclined to reach for all the time. Gotten a lot of feedback about this palette where a lot of you said, you know, you didn't like this color story, you didn't like the looks that you were getting. I personally don't feel that way. I like the looks I've gotten with this, but it is a little bit hard to get versatility in the looks if you're just stuck to using this shade, especially since it doesn't contain much depth. You look a little colorful if you're using this palette only, but it's a much better palette when you pair it with other palettes and other matte shades from different palettes, which could turn somebody off. On its own, on my eye, I still really like it, but yes, I do agree we could, I don't know, just having this as the only matte I think did make it difficult to get some looks, but I think individually each shade is very pretty, really good quality. I've enjoyed the looks that I've gotten with this. I can see people's hesitation with this palette. It's definitely not going to be for everybody, but in terms of quality, it's really good. And if I just pick one or two shades from this palette, I really like the simple look that I get that is still subtly kind of colorful. But yeah, I still really like it, but it didn't hit the top this month, so take that as you will. Number 3 is from Viseart. So I did a big swatch and sip because they launched so many palettes over the holiday season, and this was the one that snuck into being played with in December. This is from their new Petit Fours, I think is how you pronounce it. This is Amelie, and oh my gosh, so I almost just gave this away. I wasn't that interested in it. And then one day I just put it on my eye, and it is the most beautiful peachy quad. It doesn't look very special to me, right? But it's stunning on the eyelid, and I'd argue this palette contains the best quality shimmers that I've ever tried from Viseart. They are so reflective and so creamy on the eyelid. They have a lot of impact that you don't see within the pan itself right now, and you just get a really simple look because it is a quad. You have all the shades you need: transition, definition, eyelid or inner corner, and then this one as an eyelid color. Whew, they are both incredible. My eyelid looked so glossy and reflective when I wore this, so this one was a shock to me. I don't want to say this is a must-have because yes, the color story still looks boring, but it looks 10 times prettier on the eyelid than it does by swatch or just by looking at it. All right, number 1 and 2 are going to shock you, but ColourPop did a great job. So the first one, well, this is number 2. It's not the first. Number 2 is the ColourPop Aurora Struck palette. I've had a lot of fun with this. Now, I am super attracted to like blues and purples and pinks, but when it comes down to it, I don't wear them on an everyday basis, as I'm wearing a purple and pink look. But I wear brown. I'm boring, right? If I'm not on camera, I'm probably wearing a brown eyeshadow, but I have been dying to play with the blues and purples because of this palette. So this one feeds my creative soul. While it doesn't transition into my everyday beauty routine, when I want to play with makeup, I've been wanting to play with this. It offers so many colors, so many ranges of depths, lots of different great formulations, and I so far have not come across a shadow that I didn't like. I mean, there's a couple, you know, that I could suggest some ways to improve, but it's quite a large palette. It's quite affordable. It is sold out right now, last I saw, but if it does come back into stock, if you want to play with these colors or add these colors to your collection, I really recommend it. The looks that I've gotten have been so beautiful. So I think this is a great way to add these colors into your collection if maybe you don't use them as much without breaking the bank, if you just want to play. Nobody said you have to wear these out, okay? Do your makeup, practice, take a quick picture, and take it off. But I've had a lot of fun with this. I really love the color story of this. It's much different than a lot of the other mega palettes that ColourPop has recently launched. And you know how a lot of palettes from like the mega palettes can have a lot of very redundant shades, just a lot of repetitive, just a lot of repeats, you know, too many similarities. I don't really feel that way with this one. I feel like almost every shade has a purpose and does something different. So this is one of my new favorite mega quads. Not number 1, because like I said, I'm too boring. But they did a great job with this and I've had a lot of fun with it. Which brings me to number 1. And I was speaking about how I'm boring. And this ColourPop palette did speak to my boring soul. And it's just crazy to me because normally when I try a lot of ColourPop palettes in a month, I do put them kind of towards the bottom just because I buy a lot of really high quality eyeshadows, and while ColourPop has good eyeshadow palettes, sometimes the quality just isn't as good as other palettes as I bought. But this one, okay, very well. Stunning. Again, sold out. I'm super sorry, but when you see this color story, you'll understand why it's ranking so high. These kind of mauve-y, cool-toned neutral shades have my heart. This was one of the few palettes that I brought with me for 2 weeks to visit my parents over the holidays. And if I wasn't testing one of the new palettes, because these I ordered while I was at my parents' house, I was using this palette. So this is by far, of this range of palettes right here in front of me, is the palette that I used the absolute most this month, which is why it deserves a number 1 spot, and I loved my makeup every time I used this palette. Now, does the quality of this compete with Pat McGrath, Natasha Denona, you know, all my favorite brands? No, it's definitely not as good, but it's okay because it worked just fine. I had no complaints, and I loved my makeup look. They even have a couple pressed glitters in here, which I normally don't like, but I had a lot of fun just kind of pressing them all over my eye look to get a sparkly look for the holidays. The mattes go pretty deep in here. They're not messy. They blend out just fine. You know, they could go deeper, as I said with the other ColourPop palettes, but I don't really mind. For every day, I didn't need anything too fancy, and this was such an easy palette to reach for. And again, these colors speak to my boring soul. So this was my most used palette. I absolutely love it. It's a new favorite from ColourPop for me, and I mean, I tried 3 ColourPop palettes this month, and I absolutely loved them. And it was a really good month in general. I don't hate any of the palettes that I tried. Like, I didn't rank these Star Wars palettes the lowest, but part of me wants to just because I didn't like how the collection was done. But at the end of the day, I really like the shadows that are in there. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this month's rankings and found it helpful. If you're curious about any of these palettes, just type it into the search bar with my name, Morgan Turner, and if I've done any videos on them, that will show up. So if you haven't liked and subscribed to my channel, make sure you go ahead and do that. This is my last palette rankings for the year 2022. I know it's 2023 now, but this was December 2022. So anyways, okay, I'm talking too much. Have a good one.